Hello! Welcome to Stitchcraft sessions number 4, I think. But it's part 2 of the Hogwarts House Stockings Stitch Along. And yesterday we worked on the cuff of the stocking. And today we're going to tackle the toe as well as the heel. And if we get both of those done, we can probably move on to the main part of the stocking. All right, so I'm doing Hufflepuff for this stream, but there are other colors for the other houses. So I've got Ravenclaw right here in blue and bronze. We've also got Gryffindor. I don't have the hoop with me right now, but this is a 3D version of it. So Gryffindor will be red is the main color, and then gold for the rest. And Slytherin is somewhere in the pile over there, but they've got green and silver. So yeah, let's jump right in. So I've got my needle all threaded with 3 strands of black. Just gonna fix the audio here a bit because the music sounds loud on my side. All right. So for the toe, we're going to do the outline in a chain stitch, which I showed in part 1 yesterday. So the chain stitch is all around the outline on the cuff, as well as the vertical lines there. So we're going to do the same this way. I was showing you reversed chain stitch before, so now I'm going to show you how to do it with the OG chain stitch, and then you can see which one you like better. So with the normal chain stitch, I'm going to start around over here and then make my way around the toe. So with chain stitch, I'm going to find that line and pull my needle through, and the knot will stop it from going all the way through in the back. And then I'm going to keep this strand of thread over to the left and kind of hold it down like this so that it doesn't go anywhere. And then I'm going to take my needle and put it in the same, almost in the same hole as where I first came in. So like right beside it. So I'm gonna do that. And you'll wanna be careful where your needle ends up behind, because you'll see that it poked through the knot. So I wanna fix that, take that off, and give this a little tug again so that the knot is flush up against the back of the hoop. And then I'm going to pull the needle through, but not all the way. So I want to leave this little loop here, and that's why it's important to keep that strand of thread anchored with your thumb so it doesn't go anywhere. And then I'm going to move it over here so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to put the needle through on the other side. Just trying to find that line. Not quite on the line, there we go. And this loop will go over that needle. So the needle goes through the loop. And I'm going to pull, and I'm going to pull this this way in the direction of the loop, the top of the loop, so that it forms a little chain stitch there. Now, to anchor that first chain stitch, to go on with the next chain stitch, I don't do original chain stitch all that much, so I kind of forgot how to do it. But here's what you do next. So we're actually gonna go this way with the original chain stitch. So with reverse chain stitch, we would have gone this way, but with original, we'll go this way, and I'll see what that, I'll show you what that means. So that's the first chain stitch. The next step is to go right inside that loop where your, let me zoom in, right inside that loop where your stitch just came out of. We're going to go all the way in again, and then keeping your thumb anchoring that thread so it doesn't go anywhere, and we're forming a loop again. And we're going to keep doing the same thing. So finding that line and making sure the needle is going through the loop, through the center of the loop, like that. And that's your second chain stitch. So make sure you're keeping the tension on that chain stitch pretty tight. I'm going to put my needle in through the center of that loop again where I just came out of. Pull, making sure my thumb is keeping this strand anchored, and before I pull all the way through, I'm going to put my needle in again through that loop where the line is. So right there. It's gonna go in between through the center of that loop. So those are my 3 chain stitches. And I'm gonna keep going this way. So it is a bit more involved than the reverse chain stitch. And if you have trouble finding the line where your needle is supposed to go through, then I usually take this loop and put it to the side for now. Find where my needle is supposed to go. That's where my needle is supposed to go. But before I pull it all the way through, I take my loop, make sure the needle is going through the center of the loop, and then pull it through. And when I pull it, I am making that chain and just tugging it. And I will keep going with that process. And it can take a little practice to find the center of the loop where you're supposed to put the needle through. So don't be too frustrated if it takes some time. I'm gonna zoom out again here. There you go. Right, so making sure that I'm leaving that loop out there so that when I find where my needle is supposed to go through, I can then put that loop over and pull the needle through the center of that loop. And keep on going. Right on the center, tug slowly. Make sure it's making a nice chain. And if you can't get the hang of this chain stitch, then you can go back to reverse chain stitch, which is weaving under each stitch and going in through the same hole you came out of, which for me is a bit easier. So I'm just noticing a little fluff of thread that shouldn't be there, so I'm gonna look over in the back and see where that is getting caught and pull it out and make sure it's not getting caught, because I don't want that showing in the front of my work. I'm gonna find the center of that loop again, put my needle through, and before it goes all the way through, I'm making my next chain stitch. So for this one, I do find it easier to make longer chain stitches so that you can go in back where you came from easier. You can also play around with the length, with the tension. Mine are pretty tight, and it just gives you a different effect. Before the stockings, I find that tighter tension looks better. Then you get this kind of effect. Like, it reminds me of this kind of texture. Right, so this is really a two-handed, I mean, it's always a two-handed job, but you're really, instead of your left hand or your right hand, depending on if you're left-handed, just holding the hoop, you need to coordinate holding the thread so that it doesn't get pulled all the way, and keeping it in place before you pull all the way through. So I'm going to find the center of that chain, that loop again, and before I pull all the way through, come up on the next stitch, and that forms my chain stitch. So I'm turning the corner here now. So I'm just going to put this to the side, while I find where my needle will come up, and then put that loop where it should be, which is right there, so that the needle can be going through the center of that loop. All right, almost at the end. So although I do find the reverse chain stitch easier, faster, this chain stitch does give me more of a chain like appearance. I don't know if it shows up quite well in the video, but like I said, you can try both out, see which one you like better, and go from there. I think what I'll do after I finish this up, I'll move to the heel, show you the reverse chain stitch, like how I did the cuff, just so we can compare a bit better without all the fill stitches in the way. And when we get to the lights, these lights, we're gonna do what's called a lazy daisy, but it is essentially like one chain stitch in this style, not a reverse one. So you will get some practice with it later on. So this is my last stitch here. I'm gonna have one just to cover up this little space, and I'll show you how to actually end this stitch So I'm going to go right where I first started, pretty close to it. Pull all the way through. And then I'm going to anchor this stitch in by putting my needle over to the center of the first chain stitch. So that's my first stitch right there. I'm putting my needle through, and when I pull this loop down, it's going to anchor that last chain stitch in. So it's not going anywhere. And that is it for the outline. So I'm gonna move over to the heel with reverse chain stitch outline, just so we can see what that looks like. But if you're doing this kit by yourself, you can go ahead and do the fill, which I'll show you in a bit. I'm just going to end it here. So I'm going to weave it in to anchor this last stitch, and cut the thread. But you won't need to do this if you're just continuing with the fill. Make my knot again. And then I'll go on the heel. So I'm going to start over here and then work my way over this way. So with the cuff, I showed you one way of starting the reverse chain stitch. I'll show you yet another way. As you'll see, there's a lot of different ways to do one thing, and trying them out is a good way to find what you like. Definitely my favorite is the one I showed you with the cuff. But with this one, we're going to start the same way we started over here. So I put my needle through, the knot is stopping it from going all the way through in the back. I'm going to use my left hand to keep this loop, this strand here, so that's going to make a loop. I'm going to go in right beside where I first started, and like I said, sometimes it gets caught in your knot like this. So to make sure that it's not doing that, I'm just going to pull it out. And then making sure to tug that knot back flush against the back. All right, so I'm going to start with a chain stitch exactly how we did it here. So putting the needle in the center of the loop, pulling through, and then instead of going this way with the chain stitch that we just did, I'm going to anchor it in place like how we finished it. So right behind that loop, I think this angle will be good, I'm going to anchor that chain stitch in place. So there's just a little tiny stitch there that's anchoring that first stitch. And then I'm going to do the reverse chain stitch like how we did the cuff. So putting my needle a distance away from the bottom of that chain stitch, I'm then going to weave my needle under, pull it, and then go back in where I came from. And then repeat. So finding the line where I'm supposed to follow, pulling my needle through, and then weaving under. I'm going from right to left. You can go left to right, whatever feels better. And then going back in where I came from. So this is the reverse chain stitch, and it is, to me, much faster, easier to control, and you don't need as much coordination as what we did for the toe. But you also get tighter stitches, and maybe it's harder, it is harder to see the chains compared to here, which is a bit looser. So depends what effect you want to go for or what you like doing more. Okay, I'm gonna rotate my hoop this way because I find that's the easier angle for me now to weave my needle through. And when you're weaving your needle through, you might get caught in this other thread here. So just making sure that you're angling the needle upwards so that it doesn't get caught in any of the other stitches. Or you can rotate it so that your needle is going under and the space where it's going, where it's pointing, is free of stitches. So then you don't need to worry about getting caught under them. My thread is starting to get a bit tight and close to the fabric here, the end of the thread. So I'm going to give it a little pull here, not all the way through, that it escapes the eye of your needle. Just making sure I'm grabbing hold of that when I'm pulling through. But I think I should be able to finish up this outline before I run out of thread. So rounding the corner here, my stitch is a bit shorter. And then I'm gonna do my last stitch here, and I'm gonna try and connect it with that first chain stitch. So what I'm going to do is go through the center of that first chain stitch. So that's through the center. And then weave it under that previous stitch I just did. And then end back in the center. I'm gonna rotate it just for ease to find that center better. And pull. There we go. And you can move it to cover that corner a bit better. And that's the outline. All right, I'm gonna finish off this thread, weaving under the stitches in the back. The stitches in the back look like back stitches when you do a reverse chain stitch. And here's what it looks like with the, chain stitch in original. It's like kind of like backstitch, but slightly, just very slightly off. All right, and snipping. And I'm getting up to my 25-minute mark, which is a quick break. And because I'm doing a Harry Potter themed hoop, I'm gonna do a trivia question. And if chat is quiet about it, I will answer it myself. So I started doing dice recently. Okay, magical objects. What object hangs in the front window of the night bus, periodically making comments? What object hangs in the front window of the night bus, periodically making comments? That is the question. So we're gonna see if anyone answers, but if not, I will answer it. And while that's happening, I'm gonna prep my next 3 strands of thread. And I showed you how to do this in part 1, so feel free to go check that out again if you missed it. But this is how I like to separate my 3 strands of thread. And I'm not using a needle threader for this one because I found that the brand that I bought was pretty bad. It kept fraying the thread and it would split like right here, which is not ideal. So I'm just gonna do it by hand. And then here for the knot at the end, I'm doing the quilter's knot, which I also showed in part 1. So I'm gonna snip this off because it's a little long and they're not all the same height. There we go. All right, so what object hangs in the front window of the night bus, periodically making comments? It is the shrunken head. But I can't remember what the name of the shrunken head is, so I don't know. Maybe it doesn't have a name. A shrunken head. Yay. All right, so getting back to the stocking. So we're gonna do the fill stitch for this toe. It's gonna look like this. So lots of texture there. And I did that using a split stitch. So we've done split stitch before if you watch the Expecto Patronum kit stitch along, but I'll show it again here because it's a little bit different. And to help with this, I'm actually gonna take a pen. This one is the Friction, but it's a heat erasable pen. Pilot is the brand, but you can use any pen because it's going to get covered up by thread, so you don't need it to be easily erasable. Just make sure you don't mark up like any of the white space around the stocking, because then you'll definitely see that. But for this one, I'm going to follow the direction of this curve here, this curve. So from here, I'm going to go this way, this way, this way, until I get all the way to the end. And to help with that, I like to take the pen and actually draw that line. So from here to here, I'm going to make a curve. And I'm going to do this in sections. Doesn't need to be perfect, but just helps with the direction of your threads. So I've got 3 curves that are following this one. All right, so my split stitches are going to follow that direction. Let's zoom out again. So split stitch, I'm going to start on this end and go all the way up here. I'm going to go from underneath the outline of the chain stitch. Go a distance away, following that curve. That's my first stitch. And then from then on, I'm going to keep splitting the stitch, the previous stitch. So, going a short distance away from the back of the hoop towards the front. I'm going to go through the center or close to the center of the previous stitch, splitting it. So like that. And that is going to form my first split stitch. And I'm going to keep going in that same pattern, following this line. I'm seeing a little fuzzy being caught from the back, so I'm gonna tug that away, make sure it's not showing up in the front, and keep going with my split stitch. So splitting the stitch before. And keeping on going. And like I've mentioned before, you can rotate the hoop however you want, whatever makes it easier for you to go where that needle needs to go. Okay, and rotate it again because I want to go underneath that chain stitch to do my very last stitch on that curve. So once I've got my first curve, I'm going to go back and fill in this section here. And I'm going to keep going with the chain stitch, the split stitch, as if there was a line of a curve there. I don't need to draw it anymore though, because it's easier now to follow this curve that I've already stitched. So got that first one, split that first one, and keeping on going. Pretty close to that first curve that we just stitched. And this is where it's fine to not be perfect, because it all adds to the texture that you get at the end. So if you want to vary the lengths of your split stitches as you go, that's totally fine. This part's pretty fun. Nope, something's getting caught. There's a little fuzzy there. Which I think is this one. There you go. And so if that happens a lot, where this thing keeps getting caught, you can try to anchor it down so that when your stitches go over here, it's going to keep this little strand in place, so then you don't get the fuzzies anymore and you can snip it off. But I don't want to snip it now because I don't want to undo the knot, because I think that is from the knot. So just trying to anchor it with my other stitches while I'm going. So you see this one, it's going to, that one, it's going to anchor that strand in so that it doesn't keep moving around. And I think just one more curve will do it to finish off this little section. And that one's going to be pretty close to that outside curve. So I'm just gonna rotate this to see better where I'm stitching. You can see the fabric is getting completely covered by the fill, which is what we want. All right. So give it a good look over, see if there's any fabric poking through that you want to cover up. Mine looks pretty good. And that's what it looks like with that section filled in. And it's hard to see with the black. So if you have a different color, if you have a different house, this is what it looks like with brown or bronze. And I should clarify, it's hard to see with the black on video, but like when you actually look at it in real life, you do see that texture. All right, so I still have quite a bit of thread, so I'm gonna keep going. Where did I finish off? Over here. My thread finished off over here. So I'm gonna jump over here, do this curve, and then fill in the rest of the sections, or the rest of the section afterwards. And as I'm stitching this, I'm just noticing that my fabric tension is getting a little bit loose this way. So you can see, like, when I push in, like, the fabric is giving quite a bit. And while we're stitching, we want to make sure that the fabric is tight, like a drum. Like, you should be able to not, like, the fabric shouldn't be loose going like this. So what helps is if you turn it over and just give it a little tug all around, and but making sure not to tug too much such that it would distort this design, and like maybe it's pulled too much up this way but not enough this way. So making sure that when you're tugging it back so that your fabric is tight against the hoop, that you're doing it equally all around. And so I'm not getting that give that I'm not getting, yeah, the fabric is much tighter over here now, which is what I want. So keeping an eye on that as you're stitching is also important. So I'm gonna keep going now. All right, that's the curve, and I'm gonna go back and fill in that section. I think I'm gonna finish off this thread, and then it should be about time for a quick little trivia / exercise break. And by exercise, I mean stretching out my fingers, not actual exercise. All right, I'm getting pretty close to the end there, so gonna stop right there and weave it in underneath all of these stitches. And it's quite a thick mound of stitches there. All right, and snipping it. There. These are all my loose threads I snipped off. I like to keep them and put them in a little jar. All right. Let's do trivia. Green. Animals and magical creatures. What type of animal does Hagrid buy Harry as a birthday present in Diagon Alley? What type of animal does Hagrid buy Harry as a birthday present in Diagon Alley? Ooh, that's good. Burst of coffee. All right, let's see if chat has anything to say. But while I'll wait as I prep this next strand of thread. Or next 3 strands of thread. All right, and I'm just using the manual technique here, which is my favorite technique. And my quilter's knot. All right. So I'm gonna keep going with this fill. But before that, what type of animal does Hagrid, oh my goodness, does Hagrid buy Harry as a birthday present in Diagon Alley? It was Hedwig the owl, which I think is a snowy owl. I don't know how specific it'll be. It just says an owl. Got it right. I feel like there hasn't been a trivia question that I've gotten wrong. Just saying. Maybe next time I'll try to answer all of the questions, just as a challenge. All right, keeping going with this split stitch fill. Oh, so one thing I often do is when I first start a stitch and then I pull through, I end up actually pulling the knot along with it, which is not what I want. So I noticed that because when I started to pull, it was like super short, so I knew something was wrong. So let's make sure that's untangled. When I pull through, that knot stays flush against the back of the hoop. There we go, that's better. So when I first thread my needle, I know that it should pretty much come up like near my head. I cut my threads arm length, so from like my arm over to my shoulder is my preferred length of thread, and if you do buy the kit, your thread will come in that length. Any longer and you're prone to tangles and you're just like pulling and pulling and pulling, but any shorter and it's like you run out of thread really fast and you're gonna have to keep on threading and rethreading a lot. So I do find that arm length is a nice length of thread to start with. Of course, not everyone's arms are the same length, so you're getting my specific arm length, which is probably not that long. So almost finished up with this section. And you can see that the pen marks that we had drawn on earlier are covered completely by the thread, so you don't need to use anything that's easily erasable because it's going to get covered up. But I do want to say that the design itself, like this design, if you do buy the kit, is printed on to the fabric, so it uses printer ink, which means it is not washable or heat erasable. So we do want to make sure that all of those lines get covered up with thread. So when you're stitching, you want to make sure your needle is following this line here. If you go a little bit outside of it, that's fine. The 3 strands of thread, though, will be enough to cover up that line. So if you do follow it, it will not show through. So I've just got a sliver of fabric here left to do. I just want to make sure I'm covering that all up. So you can see there's like a little sliver left there. On the video it's hard to see, but like with my eyes in real life I definitely see it. So I want to make sure covering that up. that's a nice texture here on this split stitch fill, which I really like. All right, I think one more little sliver to be covered up, and that is good. So I'm gonna go jump to this curve and then fill in the section. Rotate it to get a better angle here. So this is not, you know, perfect curve at all, but that's okay because we're trying to fill this space in, and we're just trying to get that texture in there with all of the split stitches, so it doesn't need to be a perfect curve all throughout. All right, and then the very last bit on the toe here, we'll need to have split stitches. They're just a couple stitches to fill in that little hole, and I'm just gonna rotate it kind of all angles, see if there's any bits that I missed. Doesn't look like it, and that toe is good to go. And we're gonna go to the heel now. So I'm gonna weave this in through the back. It's a bit harder when you're near the edge here, so just trying to find a good angle that works for you. Just that works for you, and just making sure that we're weaving under threads. Maybe I'll go from this angle actually. So that it doesn't get undone and our stitches stay where they should be, because last thing we want is that they get undone and you'll have to redo it. There we go. So that should be pretty on there. I could probably still use this strand of thread for the heel, but it's like in that, it's like short enough that like I don't really feel like doing a couple stitches with it and then having to rethread, so I'm just going to put it away and start a new one. And if you do get the kit, I will have extra thread included I'm keeping track of how much thread I'm using for the samples, and then doing either double or just half of double. So we're doing 3 strands here. Ah, it's caught in my hair. There we go. Alright, so just licking the ends and flattening it so that it's easier to pull through the eye of the needle. Alright. Let's do trivia while I'm already taking a break anyway. Did I just do green? I just did green. Let's try another one. Alright, there we go. Pink. Magical spells and potions. Which one of the unforgivable curses is used to torture the victim? Which one of the unforgivable curses is used to torture the victim? Okay. I'm gonna answer that before I go into this because this is a slightly different stitch. So the unforgivable curse is Crucio, or the Cruciatus curse. Yay. Alright, so with the heel, I'm going to do the same thing and take a pen and draw the direction of where our stitches should be. So for the heel, we're going to follow the direction of this line here. So going this way. Like that. And as I'm drawing, I'm noticing my fabric tension is starting to come loose again. So I'm gonna make sure it's tight by tugging on the ends here. You can also tighten it more with this little screw going towards you. It's pretty tight already, but if you want it even tighter, you can take pliers and use it to turn towards you. But the kits do come with the design already on the hoop and pretty tight. It's just that while you're stitching, it is normal for the fabric to get a little bit loose, so you do have to tug on it. But other than that, the fabric should already be in the hoop. Right. So we're going to do split stitch again, but this time following this direction instead of a curve. So let's do that. I'm gonna start from over here. So last time I did start like underneath the chain stitch, but you can also go the other way and start from outside and then go underneath that chain stitch and then keep going with your split stitch, so going a short distance away and then splitting the center of that previous stitch. And I'm gonna keep on doing that. And once that's done, going right beside it to finish off that section. And I like to work in sections like this makes it feel a bit more manageable as I'm stitching. Like, okay, I can finish this section. Like, it's not as overwhelming to me as thinking about, oh, I need to like fill in this whole section. I know it's pretty small, but to me it like kind of chunks up the work in what feels like doable tasks, and if I'm looking to get just like 20 minutes of stitching in, for example, this really helps with that. Like, I'll finish this small chunk and then I'm done, or maybe I can keep going, which tends to happen. Split stitch is pretty quick to do, especially as a fill, because you're not trying to be perfect. So that's good for me. Next one. Always gotta reposition for a better stitching position, I guess. I tend to curl up on like my armchair and have my feet up, get cozy, stitch it up while something's playing in the background. That's one of my favorite things to do. But with the stream, because I do want to make sure it gets caught on the camera and that you're not watching me just like my face super close like that. Even though I do, like, I start out like this all nice and proper, and then I tend to like keep getting closer and closer as I keep going. So I just have to readjust every once in a while. But I do want to try different streaming setups, because this is only the fourth time I've done it, and slowly making tiny adjustments as I go and rewatch and see like how much can you actually see, how much do I keep, how comfortable is it for me to keep doing this for like more than a couple hours. So next time I might try being on my armchair and then have a hoop stand on the floor, but that allows me to like stitch more comfortably. Then I have to figure out how my computer, how I can see my computer, the chat, all that stuff. So tons to experiment with, which is pretty exciting. So I do have a little fuzzy coming out there, but I know that it's gonna get covered up, so I'm gonna leave it for now. Not for now. I'm gonna leave it, and it did get covered up, so not too worried about that. little bit to do here. It's pretty repetitive. Not much to say about the stitching that I haven't already said. So for fun, let me tackle a couple extra trivia questions to keep myself entertained. Why does Harry have the ability to speak parcel tongue? Because Voldemort's soul is in him? Or was it? Yeah. Or is it? Yeah, I think that's it. I won't look at all the other ones. Voldemort transferred some of his own powers to Harry the night he tried to kill him. Okay, well that's not exactly what I said. That's what I thought, but I thought it had something to do with like the Horcrux aspect. How are Hogwarts headmasters celebrated in the current headmaster's office? They have a bunch of portraits of them, and they can talk to the current headmaster and give like advice and stuff, or like pretend to be asleep when really they're just listening in to conversations. I mean, what are you gonna do when you're a portrait? It's pretty boring. A portrait of them hangs in the headmaster's office. Yay! All right. What form does Luna Lovegood's Patronus take? Ooh. I think it's a rabbit. A hare? Either one of those. I don't know what the difference is. A rabbit. What color does a remembrall turn to let someone know they've forgotten something? I believe red. Red, yes. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione arrive in Hogsmeade, after narrowly escaping their break into Gringotts Bank, who leads them to safety? That would be Dumbledore's brother, Aberforth. Aberforth? Aberforth? I don't know how to say his name. That's correct. However you say his name. Who do Harry, Ron, and Hermione catch spying on them in number 12 Grimmauld Place? Spying on them. Is it Creature? The house elf? Creature the house elf? Yeah. Alright, well, I got all those except maybe for number 1. I don't know. I didn't say that exact same thing, so. And finished up the heel with just barely the right amount of thread to go. And I don't think there's any slivers that I missed, so pretty happy about that. And I'm gonna weave, oops, I just poked myself with a needle. I'm gonna weave this in. There we go. And snip it off. So that's all of our secondary color done. So black is the secondary color for Hufflepuff, which is the hoop that I'm working on. So now I can move on to the yellow, which is the main fill stitch here. All right, so I'm gonna grab the color here and do the same thing. I'm using 3 strands again for this fill. So keeping this together. not quite. Only 2 went in, not 3, so going to do that again. All right, so that's a bit difficult because they're all different lengths. So I'm going to cut them all to be the same length, and then it's easier to flatten them and poke them through. Okay. So doing my quilter's knot. There we go. So for the main event, I'm gonna do a chain outline on here, jump over here, back to here, and then start doing the fill stitches. And yeah, so I'm gonna do reverse chain stitch because it is easier for me. If you liked the outline on the toe, which is the OG chain stitch, then you can definitely do that. If you do decide to do that, the direction of your stitches will be opposite from what I'm doing. So just keeping that in mind. But I'm going to do the reverse chain stitch starting with, for this one, I'll do what I did for the heel, which is start with a anchored chain stitch. So going from same hole, but keeping this, but keeping this loop, and then starting the first chain stitch like this, pulling through the center of the loop, and then anchoring it just behind that stitch, behind the top of that stitch. Make sure that you're not inside the loop, but outside of it. Hope that you can see that, because that's what's going to anchor that stitch in, so that doesn't go anywhere. So there's like this tiny stitch at the top of that chain, and then you see the chain there. So that's the first stitch. I'm going to go right below it and then weave it under the chain stitch. So that's going under and then pulling it out. And then I'm going to go in the exact same hole I just came out of and pull it through. So that's our chain. And I'm going to keep on following this line. And this chain is coming out much nicer on video, like the yellow thread compared to the black, because you can actually see each chain better. So I hope that gives you a better idea of what the chain stitch looks like, because with the black it is hard to catch on camera, the little chain details. But what I'm gonna do is probably run another one of these and then do a different house stocking color. Because by then the people who had bought their kits will probably have received them, and we can do them together. So I got a little tangle here, so I'm going to show you how to deal with that. So as I pulled, I noticed that I couldn't pull anymore, and there's definitely a tangle, like a little knot that formed over there. So I'm going to pull it back to see that knot. That's what it looks like. And 99% of the time, what you'll need to do is take your needle and put it through the center of that top loop that you see there. And pull. So either take the one end, and if it doesn't move it, then take the other end and pull, and you'll see the knot, the loop got smaller. That's the word I'm looking for. It got smaller, and it's flush up against the needle now. And so the last step is to take it out and smooth it out, and now the knot is gone. And I can pull it all the way through again. So if you do get a knot like that, take your needle, put it through the top of the knot, and pull one of the threads down until the loop is flush up against the needle. And then you can take it out and smooth it out, and the knot will be magically gone. And like I said, that works like 99% of the time. If it does not work, then you might have to snip your thread. Well, first of all, you can try to untangle it. If you can kind of follow where each strand is looping through and try to unknot it, that's worth a try. If not, snip it off, rethread, and weave the rest into the back so that it doesn't go anywhere. So for this last chain stitch here, I want to get as close to the black outline as I can, kind of go underneath it so that it connects a lot better, and so it feels like one stocking. There we go. Then I'm going to jump to over here and go this way. It's not that big of a jump, but it does make me feel better for jumps like that to anchor my thread under some of the stitches that are already there so that it doesn't get accidentally snipped or anything like that. So that's how I make my jumps. I kind of anchor it underneath. And then now I'm on the other side. I'm on the other side here from the toe to the heel, and I can keep going. So I'm going to rotate it this way and start it like how I started over here. So I'm going to do my first chain stitch. This is getting caught and showing up in the front. I'm gonna make sure that doesn't happen. And then I'm going to go in from the same hole that I came out of, making sure that my thumb is keeping this loop on the front of the hoop and that's not going all the way through. I'm going to take my needle and put it over to the top, and that's going to form my first chain stitch. So my needle is going to go through the center of that loop, pull it through, and then anchor it behind the top of that loop. Again, making sure you're not going through the center because this is going to act as the anchor for that chain. So a little stitch at the top. And I'm going to keep going with my reverse chain stitch. Having trouble finding that line. There you go. coming up on the 20 minutes, so I'm gonna tackle my next few set of questions. I won't do the dice, I'll just do them all. It's pretty quiet on chat anyway. I think maybe I'll do them all at the same time and then check the answers after, so I'm not like flipping back and forth. Let me put it over here so I can read it. After Voldemort attacks Harry with the killing curse in the Forbidden Forest, who checks to see if he is dead? That was Narcissa Malfoy. Draco's mom. What is Lavender's nickname for Ron when they are seeing each other? 1-1. Very cute. Although Ron didn't think so. Which ingredients does Snape find missing from his stores during Harry's 4th year at Hogwarts? Ooh, I wonder how specific they want that to be, because I know it's going to be Polyjuice Potion ingredients, but I definitely would not be able to name which exact ingredients. All right, I'm jumping over to here, but like I said, here I'm going to try and weave it in. Oops, sorry. I'm going to try and weave it in under these existing stitches for my jump. But yeah, I don't know what ingredients are in Polyjuice Potion, so I don't know, bat wings or something. Who has bequeathed gifts to Ron, Harry, and Hermione that the Minister of Magic personally delivers? That would be Dumbledore when he died. Who does Hermione impersonate during Polyjuice Potion, using Polyjuice Potion, when she, Ron, Harry, and Griphook break into Gringotts? Bellatrix Lestrange. That was such a good scene and such good acting in the movies. And it's like Helena Bonham Carter acting as Bellatrix, acting as Hermione. So good. And then last question. What are the skeletal winged horses that pull the carriages from Hogsmeade to Hogwarts? They are Thestrals. Alright, just in time. Outline is all done. Oop, not quite. Yeah, there we go. Alright, let me check the answers and then we'll get to the fill for the stocking, which is super fun and a slightly new stitch from what we've been doing so far. Narcissa, 1-1. Ooh, okay, so it's Boomslang, Skin, and Lacewing Flies, which are the Polyjuice Potion ingredients. I will remember that for next time. Albus, Bellatrix, and Thestrals. 5 out of 6. All right. So for the last half hour or so, we'll probably get a few stitches done in the fill for the stocking. It is the largest fill in this kit, in this design. So it will take a while. And for this fill, we are using long and short stitches mixed with split stitch. I don't know if there's an actual name for it, but I'll show you what the end result looks like. So this is the Ravenclaw hoop, and this is what that texture looks like. So it's really nice. It looks like split stitch, but it's more varied in an intentional way. So I'm going to take my pen again because it will help during this part. And the direction of the stitches is going to be vertically following the kind of like the hoop grid. So if you think of a vertical line going straight up and down when the hoop is facing you, and this is the horizontal, right? So the vertical is this way. We're going to follow that vertical line. It doesn't need to be perfect. Like if it's a little slightly diagonal, that's totally fine. So what I like to do is take the edge of this heel and make a line from there and upwards. So that's my first vertical line. And I'm gonna follow that line downwards. Again, you don't need to be perfect here, but just some sort of guideline to help you. And then same thing, going this way, and then this way. So, there we go. Not perfect, like I said, but it's gonna get covered up and it's just gonna act as a guideline for us. So with long and short stitch, what it's gonna look like is, let me see if I can grab a piece of paper from somewhere. Don't really have one ready. Let me grab one here. There we go. And this is something that I will definitely add to the written instructions in the kit. I just haven't quite finalized that. But with long and short stitch, if you imagine a little section like this, you're going to start out with long and short stitches. This is exactly what the name describes. So I'm going to start with a long stitch. So it'll go like this. And then the next one right beside it is going to be about half of that. And then going to go long again. I know there's a gap between there, but when we're stitching it, it's going to be right next to each other. So long, short, long, short, and so on. So we're going to alternate between long and short. And then the next set of stitches will build on top of those stitches, but we're also going to split those stitches. So I start from all of the short stitches. I'm going to go past that long stitch like this. Every short stitch is split with a stitch that goes past the long stitches. And we'll see what that looks like when we're actually stitching. So that's the next step. And then we're going to go on the next set of stitches again. We're now going from what was the long stitch, so these little gaps in between, and we're going to do the same thing. So another stitch, we're going to go past that last set of stitches. And this is going to repeat until we get to like the very end. And when we get to the very end, we're ending it with however much gap and stitch is left to finish off those stitches. So that's the general concept of long and short stitches. And the extra part is that we're splitting the stitch, not at the exact center, but enough so that it splits the previous stitch and not going through the same hole, because if you go through the same hole, you will see a little hole. You'll see a hole in the fabric, and that's not what we want. We want it to be smooth like that. All right, so we'll see what that looks like. in practice. So let me get this all set up. So I'm going to start with this little section here. On the line, here, if it helps. This is kind of going to be my long stitch length. So I'm going to start with a long stitch. And then right next to it is going to be a short stitch. Making sure that your needle is going underneath that chain on the cuff there. And then right next to the short stitch, I'm going to do another long stitch. And then a short stitch. And then a long stitch. And then a short stitch. Alternating between both. Doesn't need to be like exactly the same height of long and short stitches, as long as the relative length of the long and the short, like you can tell. This is going to be a short stitch and then a long one. All right, and then that takes me to the end of that right edge. So I've got a bunch of long and short stitches here, right? Long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long. And then I'm at the edge. The next set of stitches will be we'll be doing all of the short stitches, so these little gaps in here. That's where I'm going to be stitching next, and making sure to split that short stitch. Okay, so I'm going to go in between those two long stitches and split the short stitch that's in between them. Okay. Next, I'm going to go again in between the long stitches and then split the short stitch in between. And your long stitches might be slightly covered up. That's okay. It contributes to the texture and like the little bumps that you get, because split stitch is not as smooth as satin. And then I've got a tiny little sliver of fabric here that I'm going to close off there to hide. All right, so we've done our second row, and now you can see there's gaps again where the long stitches are that we haven't filled in yet. So that's going to be our next set of stitches. So I'm going to go back to where my guideline is, past that last row, this little line here. I'm going to go past it just up a little bit, like half of it, and split the stitch above, go in between the gap between these two, find the stitch inside that gap and split it, and do the same thing. So I'm in between these two gaps. I'm in between these two gaps. I want to split this stitch that's in between them. And it doesn't need to be the exact center of it, as long as you're not going through the same hole that stitch ended. So if I were to go through the same hole, it would be like over here, right there. But I don't, so I want to split the stitch that came before. All right. And then I've got just a little bit of fabric left there that's showing through. So I'm going to go in and cover it up. This time not really worrying about like which gap is where anymore. I'm just trying to cover it as best as I can because it's quite a small area. And I'm like right at the end of my thread, but I think I can do it. I mean, I can go back and fill this in. I wanna get to the end of my thread. All right, here we go. So that is long and short slit stitch. Weave this in. And snip. All right, so that's the beginning. And then I'm going to start here again and then fill in this whole section and then fill in this section. So let's take another 3 strands of thread. There we go. All right. So long and short again. Just fixing my fabric tension, making sure it's all good. By the way, this is called a needle minder. I love this one because it's actually Harry Potter themed. So it says Lumos, there's a wand, stars. And I got this one from Chubby Unicorn Crafts on Etsy. And they have a bunch of other awesome stuff. But it keeps my needle safe so that when I'm not using it, I can, oops, that didn't work out like I usually do it. But I just like throw it on and it's a magnet here. So I just throw it on and it keeps it nice and safe for when I'm not using it. All right, so let's do some more long and short stitch. We're working on this section, so I'm going to start with a long stitch here. My needle is going to go under as close to that outline of the cuff as possible, and then I'm going to do a short stitch. And then a long right next to it. And then a short. Oops. And then a long. And a short, and we're just alternating with long and shorts right next to each other in a vertical line. Not worried too much about the consistency of lengths in between them. All right, I got another tangle again. So for this one, it's quite small. So I'm actually going to try and just straighten it out with my fingers, pulling it, and it becomes undone. And I don't think I've shown it this stream yet, but if you want to make sure you're preventing tangles, it's not doing it, but if you want to make sure you're preventing tangles, you're going to put your hoop up parallel to the ground like this and just leave it so that the needle twirls and twirls and twirls until it's at its resting position, like its natural resting position, and that should avoid tangles more easily. I'm actually going to not do that for most streams just because I want to show what the different types of tangles you might get as you're working, and how I personally deal with them. Okay, a long and then another short. And that is the first row of stitches that we're gonna do. Got strand caught there. Or it's just a fuzzy. No, there's something definitely caught. Oh yeah, there it is. There we go. That's better. So yeah, that's the first row of long and short. And then now I'm going to go in between the longs and split the shorts. So starting back from the left side, going to find a spot here. So the spot here is just going to be a distance away from this row of long stitches, not too far back, about half of the length of the long stitches. And then I'm going to find that short stitch in between those long stitches and split that stitch. I'm going to keep on doing that. So in between the gaps, splitting that stitch. In between the gaps, splitting that stitch. All right, so there is a different way of doing this, of course, and I'm going to show you how to do that, just in case you're having trouble finding, like from here, where exactly to position your needle for that next row. You can go backwards. So I'm going to flip this over like this. So I'm facing this way. And instead of coming up over here, I'm going to come up splitting first. So on the right hand side, I have my short stitch here, and I'm going to split it. And then come up above this row of long stitches, right? And then my next one, remember before we were coming up from over here and then splitting, we're gonna split first instead. So finding the gap in between those long stitches, and then and then going straight up in between. And then again, finding the stitch that you're supposed to split in between the gaps, and then going all the way upwards. Finding the stitch in between the gaps, splitting it, and then ending upwards. So this is a different way of doing it. If you are having trouble with the other way, this might be easier for you. So that's my next row. And I'm going to go back in between the gaps. Whoops, sorry, in between the gaps here. And then go past that row of stitches. I think this might actually be easier for beginners. I'm just used to the other way. So maybe I will start with this for the written instructions for the kit, actually. All right, and we're starting to see that my lines are getting a little wibbly wobbly, but that's okay. It doesn't need to be perfect. We are getting the variation of split that we need, and that's really what we're going for. I think I missed a split somewhere in here, so I'm gonna go and add that in and then go back to the current row that I'm working on. I think that's why I have such a big gap in between them. I could be wrong. But if you do lose like where your long and shorts are, try your best to kind of recreate them as you go. Like here, I'm going to recreate that one. All right, and then I'm starting in between the gaps again for another row. Splitting the stitch in between the gaps. I'm running out of thread, so I might get one more in here. And then that should be good. And I'm going to weave in through the back. There you go. And I probably have time for one more. Finish off another 3 strands, and that'll take us to the end. Or maybe I'll go for a little bit longer. Maybe I'll do half of the stocking left. There is another session that I've scheduled for Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern time, and hoping to do 2 hours, and that will be finishing off whatever stitches need to be finished, and also backing the hoop. So closing this up so that it looks like this. And you can't see the hoop butt anymore, and it's all glued down with cardstock. So I want to make sure that that is ready for Tuesday, so we'll see how far we get here. The lights should be fairly quick to do, so maybe I'll just do just past 2 hours on this one. All right, so I'm gonna keep going how I was doing it, because I think it'll be easier for beginners, so I might stick with this method. Moving on. All right, so that's the row, and then I'm gonna go back to the right hand side and fill in all these gaps. am overdue for another set of questions. So I'm gonna do them one at a time. Who is taken captive when Harry goes to face Voldemort in the Forbidden Forest after the Battle of Hogwarts? I believe that was Hagrid. Who does Harry invite to Slughorn's Christmas party? It was Luna, and it was so sweet. What type of memory is needed for a Patronus charm to work? Really happy memory. That's why it's one of my favorite. It is my favorite spell. On their quest for the Philosopher's Stone, Harry, Ron, and Hermione need to catch what flying object? They needed to catch a flying key. Oop. Who is speculated to be the informant leaking Dumbledore's secrets in Rita Skeeter's book? I think it was Bathilda Bagshot, because she used to live near the Dumbledores. And lastly, what does Fawkes do the first time Harry meets him in Dumbledore's office? He literally bursts into flames. Which is pretty alarming for a 12-year-old child, I believe. Alright, let's see. Hagrid, Luna, happy. Ooh, but powerful memory. I did not add powerful. That's interesting. A key, Bathilda Bagshot, and bursts into flames. So maybe 5 out of 6, because I didn't say powerful memory. Next row. Now, if you want, you can try and conserve thread, so try to use less thread by planning out where your next stitch should be. So for example, I finished over here, but then I jumped all the way back here when I probably could have started again my next row here and then went over here and then kind of crisscrossed that way. So I could have conserved a little bit more thread with a different approach, but if you're just getting used to this and just kind of trying to follow a like a pattern that's easier to remember, like where your next stitch is supposed to be, then do that, and don't worry too much about thread conservation. I will put extras in the kit. So for example, here I just finished my row. Where's my last stitch? My last stitch is like over here on the left side. I could go all the way back on the right side and start there and keep going like I have been, or I could start from the left side and go towards the right. So I'll do that just to show you that either way works. filling in the gaps. Starting to run out of thread here. Maybe I'll finish this last little bit, maybe not. And then as we're going this last little section here, I'm not as worried about the gaps and following a certain order of doing them. I'm trying to cover up this section however I can. Okay, so played thread chicken and lost. It came out of my eye of the needle, and you'll see that the end of the thread is getting quite frayed just from going in and out of the fabric. So going to snip off a little bit and rethread and finish it off. So it is more difficult to do this when your thread is short. So keeping an eye on that and not pushing your luck. Right. Because you want to make sure you have enough to weave under the threads in the back so that that last stitch doesn't come undone. All right, there we go. There we go. So I think I'm actually going to keep going till 2:30 because I want to get a good chunk of this main stocking done, this main color, if not all of it, so that on Tuesday we can worry about the lights, the loop, and backing. I think that's a good separation of responsibilities or videos. I don't know what I'm trying to say. But I feel like I'm better to keep going today while it's while I feel good to do it. Whereas on Tuesday it's a 6 p.m. stream and I don't want to like be rushing to get all this done, and it's like pretty late and it'll be dark, which won't be as fun. Okay, so I'm just gonna quickly turn on my space heater because my toes are getting cold. That's not comfortable. All right, so keep it on going with the long and short stitch. Here's what it looks like so far. Really nice texture, I love it. Okay, so I was finishing off over here, but I think what I'm going to do is actually do this section, jump over here to finish it off, and then do the long and short stitch coming upwards here. Just so I'm not like going over here, jumping over here, and then jumping back here. So just planning a little bit where my stitches will go. So I will do the long and short stitch over here. So I'll start with a long this way and a short. I'm gonna rotate it this way. Actually, it's easier for me to put my needle in diagonally underneath this black chain stitch. And with the angle of this stocking going this way, it's hard to keep that long and short like this. So try your best. They're gonna be pretty short stitches. It won't feel like a long and short, but in terms of relative length to each other, it will be long and short. So I'm gonna stop there and then do the next stage. So here is a long, and split the one in the middle here. And go up. And then I'm going to make another long up there. There's no stitch to split, but just trying to create that long stitch as I'm going up. I'm covering up this little corner here with a couple stitches. Okay, I think that covers it all up. There's a couple spots that I wanna, you can't quite see them there, but just wanna make sure they're covered up as well. So I'm gonna do a little split stitch where I wanna cover up the fabric that's still showing through. Alright, good. And then I'm gonna go back in this little space that I missed before. Making sure I'm splitting previous stitches to keep with that effect. Right. Maybe one more there. All right. Almost there, like halfway through. So now I'm gonna go from the bottom up towards the top. Oops, I just I accidentally unthreaded my needle just with my hand being in the wrong place as I was moving around my hoop. Okay, there we go. So I was gonna say, if it helps, I can do a little line like this to show that that's where I want my longer stitches to be at. But then I see like, okay, this is gonna be super long, so I probably need little short, like a short one here to build up to that. Oh my god, a little short one here to build up to that longer stitch. So what I mean by that is I'll do short, long, short, and then start to do the longer ones here. And then I'll come back up to that long one and fill in these gaps. Fill in that gap. Split that last stitch. And then start to do the long short again. So where you do the long short might shift a little bit depending on like this curve. It's easier to start long and short when it's straight like this along the cuff. So if you want, you can go back here and then go down. But I just wanted to show you what I would do if I were to start with a more curved edge along here. So just trying to build that long and short pattern. But not having a really long stitch coming from here to up here. It's really like kind of building up a couple of stitches at a time. So I'm going to, rotating it. I'm going to go and split the stitch now, going with that method. So splitting the stitch in between the gaps, going up. Next, in between the gaps, splitting that stitch and going up. In between the gaps, split the stitch and go up. And this one is the last one over here. Right, and then doing the same thing, starting from the right edge, I'm going to split that stitch, go in between the last, in between the right edge and that gap in there, finding this next gap in between stitches, and going all the way up, finding the next gap in between, splitting and going up, and the same thing this way. All right, I'm just repeating that all the way up. Ah, not in camera view. Oh, and that was way too close to camera view. Running out of thread, so going to weave this in underneath stitches. Next few set of questions. Who do Harry and Hermione discover hidden in Bathilda Bagshot's skin in her home at Godric's Hollow? So that was the snake Nagini. In which of Harry's school years does Harry become Quidditch captain? Ooh. There was no Quidditch in 4th year, but I can't remember if Harry was captain in 5th year. Or 6th year. I think it was his 6th year, because in his 5th year, Angelina Jones was captain. So I think it's just his 6th year. Avada Kedavra is known as which curse? The Killing Curse. What headline does Harry read in a newspaper on the night bus? Oh. What headline does Harry read in a newspaper on the night bus? So that would be in 3rd year. And Sirius would have escaped Azkaban, but I don't know what the headline would say. Trying to remember the movie. It's like notorious mass murderer Sirius Black escapes Azkaban. Is it as simple as that? I'm gonna go with that. And I'll check answers after. Who sends a message during Bill and Fleur's wedding to warn everyone that the Ministry has fallen? That would be Kingsley Shacklebolt. Oop, got a little piece of thread that got caught in there. And there's a lot of thread in the back, so I just kind of have to see like where I am. I'm over here. So that means it's this little thread. I'm gonna push it over to that side so it doesn't get caught again, hopefully. All right, last question. What kind of creature is the basilisk lurking in the Chamber of Secrets? What kind of creature? The basilisk is, I mean, it's a big snake. Is there a different term for a big snake? Isn't the basilisk like just a basilisk? All right, let's check answers. Nagini, yeah. 6th year, he was captain. Good. The Killing Curse, yep. Headline is Escape from Azkaban! Exclamation mark. Okay, so I guess it was as simple as that. Kingsley Shacklebolt, and the last answer is a serpent. Okay, so more specific than snake, I guess. I don't really know what the difference is. Oh, I've got this little piece snagged as well. It's gone. It's gone now. Okay. I just noticed like a tiny little piece caught in the front that I didn't want there, so. And we're coming up to the end of this little section. Got a little piece snagged again. Don't know where it's coming from though. It's like right here. I don't even know. Yeah, you can definitely see that. So, where is that? I think it might be a lost cause to try and unsnag that. So what I'm going to do is to be very careful and take my scissors and snip off that little fuzzy. And be very careful because you don't want to snip the stitches that I worked so hard on. All right, where did I leave off now? I was over here on this gap. And finishing this off. And as I've said before, when we're going and stitching up towards an outline, we want to make sure we're going kind of angling our needle diagonally so that it goes right underneath the outline stitch and not right beside it. And that's just going to make it really like flush up against that outline. And kind of like the cuff is like going over the rest of the stocking. Like this. Like this cuff. There's more stocking there, but it goes over the stocking. So that's the kind of vibe we want to go for here. All right, I'm going on this side now and this last little bit of the rest of the stocking. But this fill definitely takes time. So it's super repetitive, which is nice, soothing. It's like you can kind of just get lost in the motions of it. So definitely if you're doing this by yourself, put a show on, put an audiobook on. It's a great relaxing activity for that. I think I'm just missing a tiny sliver here. Now I can keep going. I want to finish my coffee before it gets too late. It's definitely cold now, but it tastes delicious. All right. I got a caramel macchiato, so all of the caramel is in the bottom now, so I gotta give it a little swish to mix it all in so I'm not getting a gulp full of sweetness at the end. All right, I'm kind of losing my long and short here, so I'm going to try to recreate it. So that would be my long, so this would be my gap right here. And if you do lose it, you can like revert back to split stitch depending on the area. That works as well. The area that you want to fill. So like here there's like only 3 stitches going side by side. I'm gonna try my best to keep it long and short here. There. Okay. And then I'm gonna go back to splitting first. So I do go back and forth between like splitting first or splitting last, whatever feels better for you. Really just going for that textured effect here, so as long as it's splitting with some variation, it works. Running out of thread, so gonna weave it in, but I think the last piece of thread should take us to the end of, the end of this stocking. Okay, I'm gonna weave that in a few more times because I only did it twice and I don't think it's enough for me to feel comfortable with leaving it like that. Yeah. Okay. It's a bit harder to do this when the thread is short, but I do want to give it some bit of a lick so that it flattens easier and so that I can weave it in. I can thread it into the needle a lot better. There we go, it's better. And last 3 strands. Look at that. So much thread. We started with nothing at the beginning. All right, so maybe a little bit more than 230. So, last set of questions. What ministry initiative is Dolores Umbridge in charge of when the Death Eaters take control? Oh, I don't know this one. Something about muggles and registering, or no. Oh my god, what are they called? If your parents are non-magical, they think that you stole the magical powers or something. So you need to register or something, or maybe it's about animals, magical creatures registering. Actually, I do not know. I will learn. What type of headdress does Luna wear to support the Gryffindor Quidditch team during Harry's 6th year? A lion headdress. What is the incantation for the spell that reduces solid objects into tiny little pieces? Oof. Into tiny little pieces? I don't know. I want to say Reducto? I think it's Reducto. Just trying to think of like Order of the Phoenix and Ginny doing that spell to the little training Death Eater thing And I think she did that. 2 questions I'm unsure of. This is great. According to Professor Dumbledore, what kind of objects could conceal a Horcrux? Magical objects? No. What are the initials of Harry's oldest son? His oldest son is James Sirius. So JSP? James Sirius Potter? Lastly, which beloved pet is killed during Harry's escape from Privet Drive with the Order of the Phoenix? Hedwig. So sad. Right at the start, too. Alright, as I'm finishing this up, I do want to know the answers, especially to the questions that I am unsure of. So, oh, the Muggle-Born Registration Commission. Okay, so I was on the right track. I couldn't find the name for Muggle-Born for some reason. The Muggle-Born Registration Commission. A giant lion hat. I could have been more specific. I could have said it was giant. Reducto. Okay, so that was right. Any object. What kind of objects could conceal a Horcrux? Okay, any object. JSP and Hedwig. Oop. So the Muggle-Born Registration Commission. So official. I could describe it, but I did not know what it was called. I'm just looping back here because I'm noticing a little sliver of fabric I didn't get to. And before I weave the rest of this thread in, I just want to look at it on all sides. I'm gonna look at it over here so that I can actually see and not just see what the video sees. Look at it from all angles, the light, and I think it's pretty good. So look at that. Oh, so satisfying. So let me weave this in and then admire the work. So I do have quite a bit of thread left here. All right. So here it is. What I love about this split stitch is the texture, and when you kind of rotate it all around, it reflects the light in different ways, and it's just so satisfying. And like compared to the satin stitch, which does not have this type of texture, it's more smooth here, like you can see the difference. And then we've got the toe here, which was in split stitch, and the heel, which was in split stitch, that has similar vibes, but this just has a lot more variation in texture. Yay! And then here is Ravenclaw for comparison. So for next stream, we're going to do the loop here. This loop. And oh, except this is actually going to be in gold. I have to fix this stocking. This was one of my prototype stockings, but I do want this to be in yellow. Sorry, not gold. So this will be in yellow. We'll tackle the string lights in a dark gray. We'll use sparkly thread. So sparkly gold thread for the lights and sparkly black thread for the little lightning bolts, and that should take us to the end where we could then back up our hoop. But that is it. Thank you for watching. Hope you picked up some tips and tricks, learned a few Harry Potter trivia questions. I definitely did. I didn't know all the answers this time. and I'll see you on Tuesday in the next video. Bye!